Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lisa Nothouse, and I'm the Supporting Families Lead at the Division of DD. I'm also a parent of someone who receives services through the division. Thanks for joining us on the webinar today. These webinars are 30 minutes long, and they're intended to provide a quick overview on a particular topic or on one of the program areas for the division. Webinars are targeted toward individuals, self-advocates, and families. However, they are open to anyone who wants to listen in. So if you are someone with a disability or you're a family member, welcome. And if you're someone who supports families and their individuals, we hope that you will share this information, this opportunity with them to come back and listen at a later date if they're not able to join us live. As Kat stated in the beginning, the topic being shared today is about autism services through the Division of DD. And again, if you have questions, as she said, put those in the chat. We'll get to those at the end of the presentation. During this webinar, we're going to provide you information about the Office of Autism, about diagnosing autism. We're going to briefly talk about the Commission on Autism Spectrum Disorders. We're going to learn about accessing services in Missouri. We'll talk about the Missouri Autism Projects, and we hope to share some links to different websites and resources that you can explore further. And joining me on the webinar today is Kristen Morgan. Kristen is going to help us navigate through some of this information and get us on the right path. So Kristen, if you're ready, I will let you introduce yourself and start us off by talking about the Office of Autism.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for inviting me to speak today on the Office of Autism Services and what we have to offer. I'm excited to be here. I've been with the Department of Mental Health just since July of 2021, so I do consider myself fairly new still. But I'll go ahead and get started. I know we have a full agenda. So first I wanted to talk about the Office of Autism Services. It was established in statute in 2008 with the primary purpose of providing leadership and program development for children and adults with autism spectrum disorders. The Office of Autism Services was in existence prior to 2008, but it was a recommendation from the Blue Ribbon Panel on Autism that it be written into statute, and they were successful in getting that recommendation accomplished. As the Office of Autism, we work closely with the Missouri Autism Project, which we'll talk about more a little bit later. But we also work and partner closely with the Missouri Autism Centers to provide autism spectrum diagnosis or autism spectrum disorder diagnostic services. We currently fund 6 autism centers throughout the state. They're mainly located along the I-70 corridor. So we have Children's Mercy in Kansas City, the Thompson Center in Columbia. We have Mercy Kids, Washington University, and Cardinal Glennon in St. Louis. And then we also have a contract down in Southeast Missouri State University in Cape Girardeau to provide diagnostic services in that area of the state. We were excited to see that during the State of the State, Governor Parson recommended doubling funding for the autism centers to help further reduce the wait list for diagnostic services. So we're really hopeful that that passes and can become a part of the budget next year.
Well, that's exciting. I can remember when the Office of Autism started and some of the efforts that came out of that Blue Ribbon panel years ago. Lots of good things happened. I know
you can actually access that Blue Ribbon report on our website. So if we have time at the end, I can show you where that's located. There is a lot of good information in there.
Okay, cool. And I know you talked a little bit about the diagnosing process and places that folks can go for that. And I have friends who have children with autism, and I know several folks that have that autism diagnosis. And, you know, like with all of us, we all have different unique traits and characteristics. But can you talk a little bit about what some of those characteristics might be when you're looking for an autism diagnosis that might be standing out to folks?
Yeah, sure. So some of the most common characteristics of ASD involves social, emotional, and communication skills. So some of the most common signs include avoiding eye contact. You may see kiddos repeating or echoing words, or maybe repeating actions over and over again, such as head banging or repetitive hand movements. Some individuals may have trouble relating to others or understanding others' feelings. And then another sign that stands out is sometimes kiddos lose skills that they once had. So, for example, they'll stop saying words that they had used previously. Some of the other more common characteristics or conditions that individuals may see frequently are maybe the individual may also have an intellectual disability, or they may have sensory challenges or difficulties eating and sleeping. But again, those are just some of the common signs, but again, this is a spectrum disorder, so the signs can vary widely in severity from very mild to very severe. It just depends on each individual person.
Yeah, and I think there's even a resource on the website about that too, that maybe we can tap into and show folks that before we wrap up the webinar today.
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah, so with all the effort that's been put in place in Missouri, there's really been some giant steps to look at the services and supports that people with autism need and their families. Certainly isn't stagnant over the years. I know there's been some big changes. And I know that there's some structures in place to look at the systems, and they're always looking at the best practices that are out there. And I think that's where the commission comes into play. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the previous commission on ASD, the work that came out of that commission was the best practices and guidelines. And since diagnosing ASD can be difficult, since there's no medical test like a blood test, doctors have to look at child's behavior and development to make a diagnosis. If you want to go back to the previous slide 1 second, Lisa, I'll talk quickly about the tiered approach that's considered a best practice here in Missouri and is recommended when we're diagnosing ASD.
Okay.
If an individual falls into tier 1, then a doctor, and that's including your primary care doctors or pediatricians, they can diagnose ASD if the symptoms and behaviors clearly indicate that ASD is present in no other conditions. And then under tier 2, individuals with milder or more complex systems should have at least 2 medical professionals make that diagnosis. And then under tier 3, it's individuals with more subtle or complex symptoms and coexisting conditions should be evaluated by a multidisciplinary medical team. So again, there's a lot more information, like you were saying, on our website about the tiered approach, but that is important to remember when you're seeking a diagnosis, that is the best practice that's used here in Missouri. Another thing a best practice that we focus on is regular and specific screening. So it's really important for your pediatricians to be regularly screening for developmental delays when you're doing those well-child visits. And then also there's specific screenings for ASD that should take place at 18 and 24 months. So if your pediatrician's not doing that, I encourage everyone to request that those screenings take place. And then now I can talk about the current commission. Lisa, if we're ready for that one.
Yeah, sorry about that. I jumped ahead of you.
That's okay. So House Bill 432 was passed last July, and it re-engaged the Missouri Commission on Autism Spectrum Disorders. And so the primary charge of this commission is to produce an autism roadmap for Missouri, which encompasses the lifespan of a person living with ASD. And there's 4 phases that we will focus on. We're currently focused on the transitioning to adulthood phase, which we all know there's a lot of work to be done in that area. And the other three phases are early identification and intervention, access to care, and challenging behavior and crisis care. So when we're looking at these 4 phases, we're primarily focused on what services are already in existence, where are the gaps and unmet needs, what are the best practices out there, and then we're looking to form recommendations for improvement. We have a great group of commission members with varied backgrounds, so I'm really excited to see what good work comes out of this commission. I think there's some really exciting things that are in store.
And Kristen, I'm looking at the chat real quick. We've had a request to talk about the signs of autism again. Do you want to go back
Sure.
and touch on that, or do you want to wait until we're done and do it in summary?
That's up to you. I can go back to it real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
So again, most of the common characteristics involve social, emotional communication skills. So oftentimes kiddos will avoid eye contact. They will repeat or echo words, repeating actions over and over again. They have trouble relating to others or understanding others' feelings, and they lose skills they once had. Some other ones that I'm looking right now on the CDC website, sometimes kids won't point to objects or to show interest, such as they won't point at an airplane that's flying above them in the sky. They won't look at objects when another person points at them. They prefer not to be held or cuddled, or they might only want to be cuddled during certain times when they want to. Unaware of when people are talking to them. Very interested in people, but they don't know how to talk or play with them. Those are just a few. I don't know, Lisa, if you have anything else to add.
No, I think if we have time, the handout that you just talked about, the CDC one, we might be able to pull that up as well. But I think there's a page on the autism website that kind of goes over some of that. If I'm not mistaken, maybe we'll have time to kind of touch base on that too.
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll keep moving, and I'm gonna let you kind of go through the next set of slides because it's all about the actual services for folks who have received the diagnosis and are looking for services and supports through our division. I'll let you kind of walk through that and the eligibility process through that as well, and what that looks like for us.
Okay. So there are 2 funding streams a person can access autism services through the division. The first funding stream is through Medicaid or Medicaid waiver, and most of the services that the division provides are Medicaid waiver services. And those, the federal government reimburses the division for a portion of the cost to provide those services. Typically, those are ABA, speech, occupational, and physical therapy. And then you can go to the next slide, Lisa. And then the second funding stream is through the autism projects. And the autism projects are 100% general revenue funds from Missouri tax dollars. And it is important to note, we'll talk more about the Missouri Autism Projects in detail in a little bit, but I just wanted to point out that it is important to remember or to know that the individual autism projects cover or offer different services and may have different requirements regarding Medicaid services. So I won't go into the details of that right now unless I have a specific question, but it just is important to know that depending on which autism project you're eligible to receive services from, the types of services available to you may be different. Eligibility. Okay, so in order to obtain autism project services, you must have a documented diagnosis of ASD You must meet department eligibility requirements, which you can see on your screen now. And then you must have an identified need for specific ASD services. So again, one of the most important pieces is just to remember that you have to have a documented ASD diagnosis from your pediatrician or another licensed professional that can make that diagnosis. And then in order to access autism services, if someone's interested in receiving autism services, they will need to apply at their local regional office. And if you're not sure where your local regional office is, you can find that information on the DDD webpage. So maybe we can, if we have time, we'll be able to pull that up as well. But if you are currently enrolled in Mo HealthNet, you will either be referred to a regional office or a targeted case management agency for case management services. And if you are not currently enrolled in Mo HealthNet, you will be referred to a regional office to determine DMH eligibility. Once eligibility has been determined and you're eligible for services, you will meet with a support coordinator, and you will work with that support coordinator to develop your individualized support plan and select your authorized services.
Okay, well, you also mentioned the autism projects, that there are numerous. They're a funding source for us, and there are several across the state. And it really depends on where you live as to which project you tap into. And with each one of them being different, it would be different potentially for somebody that, you know, in Kansas City. How they do their autism project is going to be different possibly than what somebody does in central Missouri or down the southwest area, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And once we get in, I think in the next slide, I'll talk more about what those differences are. But you are right. Wherever you reside in the state, it does depend on how you access services.
Okay. So if you want to walk us through that, the next couple slides I think are about the autism projects and how people can access them.
Yeah, sure. So in Missouri, there are 5 regional projects that provide autism services to individuals and their families. Last year, this project provided services to approximately 4,000 families statewide, so we do have a large reach. Like I was saying, the structure is a little bit different in each region. So there's the Central, Southeast, and Southwest Autism Projects. They operate on what is called a shared unit business model. And so basically, to break that down, that means that there are contracted providers in those regions that the Autism Project has previously recommended or selected to provide autism services for that region. And so certain providers are provided funding to do that. Families will not have a choice of which provider they choose. So, for example, in the Southwest Missouri Autism Project, there's 7 different providers in that region. In the Southeast, there's 3, and then in Central, there's 1 provider. All of that is based on recommendations from the Parent Advisory Councils, which I'll explain what their role is in a little bit as well. And in the Northwest, in the East Autism Project, they operate on what we call the family allocation model. And so that business model is when families are given a dollar amount to spend during their plan year on authorized services, and the family can choose which provider they receive that service from. It is based on a reimbursement model, so the family would pay for the service out of pocket and then have to submit their appropriate documentation to the regional office to get reimbursed. I know it's really confusing, so did that make sense, Lisa, or is there a way I could clarify that more?
It does make sense to me, but I've been around the loop a few times, so I think probably the best thing that I would recommend if it's a new family coming through the system, somebody looking for services, is just to call their regional office in their area. Those folks will walk them through and help them. Information specialists are even out there. They'll help them figure out, navigate where they need to be, and we'll explain that. And the map's pretty clear, and we'll show them the website here in a minute too if we have time, and it goes into more detail. So
Right,
you would
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
agree. The best thing you can do is just reach out to your regional office if you're
Yeah,
interested in service.
yeah.
And some of the services that are offered throughout the state are on the screen now. Respite care, social skills training, parent and caregiver training. Those are some of our more popular and more utilized services. And again, this list isn't all inclusive, so there are other services that are offered. I know a lot of folks in the Northwest and the East Autism Project utilize their funding for summer camps and things like that as well.
Okay. So you also mentioned the parent advisory councils and the role that they have in those projects.
Right. So each of the autism projects is governed by a regional parent advisory council, and they are made up of volunteers who either have autism or they have a family member that has autism. And really their charge is to provide input and recommendations to the division about policy, budget, the services that are offered, the service providers that are used, what business model they use, so if they use the shared unit or the family allocation model. And so really they're really there to advocate and be a voice for the families in that project or region. In order to be a member of a PAC, we call them PACs, so in order to be a member of a PAC, you just have to be a Missouri resident and either have an autism diagnosis or have a family member that does. And PACs are always looking for new members, so if anyone's interested in joining their regional PAC, please reach out to me, or you can find more information on our website as well. So always looking for new people. We also have the Missouri Parent Advisory Council, and that is council is made up of members of the regional PAC. And basically just their role is to be a liaison between the local PACs and the division.
And how often do those PACs, how often do those councils meet? What would be the requirement for that? What did you say?
So regional parent advisory councils, they typically meet either monthly or every other month. It just depends. They all do things a little bit differently. And then the Missouri Parent Advisory Council meets every other month.
And would somebody, if a parent was interested in that, would they be able to participate by phone or conference call, or would they have to be there in person?
Currently, right now, everything is still virtual, and I anticipate that will always be an option to have a virtual connection available, but in the past, PAC members have met in person as well.
Okay. So I know some of those regions are pretty big. So travel, I
Yes.
just thought maybe, with travel and the situations being the way it is. So, but if there's somebody
Yep.
on the call that's interested in that, they need to reach out to you or just check out the website and make a phone call to their regional office and ask about being a PAC member.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
You got it.
Cool. All right. Well, the next page we had set aside to talk about some of the resources that are on our webpage. And the Autism Centers is one that you talked about, Kristen, and the guidelines you mentioned was on there. Don't know, let's see what our time, we've got about 5 minutes left. And it looks like we do have some questions. So let's answer the questions and then I will try to pull up the website as we're doing that. It looks like we have a question, and it's asking about adults who were misdiagnosed as a child in the 70s and 80s, but are clearly showing symptoms now as an adult. Do you have any direction on what you would tell someone in that situation? Is there anything being done to help those adults?
Well, again, so I would say that the commission that's meeting right now currently, I can bring that back to the commission to see what people have to say about that. I am not that familiar with what is being done currently, but I do know that, I mean, unfortunately, there just is not a lot of clinicians that specialize in adult care for folks with autism. So I really only know of one person that does adult diagnosis right now at this time in Missouri. I'm sure there's others, but so that is a good point, and I will raise that with the commission members since we are focused on transitioning to adulthood right now.
Okay. And another comment, it says, I saw a line that said children under 19 get state services. Is that different than DMH-DD services through the waiver and the Autism Project? So you're talking state plan, straight Medicaid, state plan services for somebody who's eligible for Medicaid, maybe, as opposed to waiver and Autism Project. The difference between those two services. And they are a different funding mechanism, correct?
They are different funding mechanisms. I do not know exactly which services are available through the state plan versus the waiver and the Autism Project off the top of my head. That would be something I would have to dig into a little deeper.
And another question. Is there or are there any resources for individuals who are diagnosed later than 22 years of age to be able to be determined DMH eligible? And you may have already addressed that.
I don't see that question. Can you repeat that question, Lisa? I don't see it in the chat.
Well, it will not scroll for me. Let's see. Are there any resources for individuals who are diagnosed later than 22 years of age to be able to be determined DMH eligible? And are you talking about access to someone who can diagnose them as an adult?
Yeah, I'm not sure what.
Yeah.
Children.
Let's quickly, let me see if I can pull up my screen. And let's show folks, are you seeing my screen with the DMH DD webpage?
Yes.
Okay. So just so folks know where the information is. Out of the way. This is the DD landing page, developmental disabilities. To find the autism resources that Kristen's referring to, you would click on community supports, come down here to Office of Autism Services, and here you're going to find all kinds of information related to autism. Here's where we're talking about the diagnosis, some of the guidelines, screening tools, about autism. There's some of the communication, social interaction, the behaviors that Kristen mentioned earlier. Here's the information about the projects, the parent advisory councils. And on this page, you will go into each one of the projects a little bit differently that will provide additional information. So I think there was a question in the chat about which project operated under which model. I think this is where that information would show up. The autism centers that you mentioned, here's a list of those and some contact information for them. Is there any other specific resource you want to highlight today?
I don't think so, Lisa. I think you covered it.
Okay. I know one of the things that people talk a lot about is the echo autisms that are going on, and tremendous resource for families and folks in Missouri, and well, actually all over, but can you see there? I've got their website pulled up. Is that showing up on your screen as well?
Yes.
Okay. And here's a really cool thing. If you're looking to share information with families, there's a tab specifically set aside that will guide them to all kinds of different talking points, areas, targeted areas to look at. And of course, my computer is slowly coming around. So this is a great resource. If you're a support coordinator or you work in that arena, this is something that you can share with the families and individuals that you provide supports and services to. It's just good information.
Yeah, they have a great page of resources right there. You can see it on your screen.
Yeah.
I encourage all of you to review that. Now, also, since we're over time, I'll put my email address in the chat, and any questions that we didn't get to answer today, feel free to email me.
Okay.
And I'll get you the answer.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. It's a lot of information. We were able to address some of the questions, and like Kat said, we can pull those out, and if we need to address it in a Q&A, we will post that on the division's webinar page as well, so that will be available with the PowerPoint and the transcript. And real quickly, I know we're very close, but the next MODD&U webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, or April 26th, and 12:30 to 1. Hope to see you guys there. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.